Welcome to Dental Business RX. Practice success in 30 minutes or less.
Thank you for calling ABC Dental.
Do your staff wake up every morning looking forward to coming to work? Do you? With the tight labor market we have right now, staff acquisition and retention is at a premium, which means you need to be on top of your game if you want to keep great team members. And the usual staff retention strategies of perks, benefits, room for advancement, efforts to increase job satisfaction and work-life balance mean nothing if you have a toxic work environment. Sure, some people will stay, but production will suffer, and you will absolutely lose people you shouldn't have who just can't take the drama anymore. So what should you be doing as an owner or manager to create a toxin and drama-free work environment? Well, that's what I want to talk about in this week's episode. My name is Jeff Bloomberg, and I'm your host. And the information I'll be sharing with you this week is something that I've used and have regularly thought with as an executive for well over 25 years, with the object of creating an upbeat and productive workplace. Should also tell you that I am not an employment attorney. So if you have questions with regards to employment law and things of that nature, you should definitely have an employment attorney or HR company that you work with if you have questions like that. And I'm not going to get into, as far as workplace toxicity, the more egregious examples, things that people can get in big trouble for, things like sexual harassment or discrimination. Obviously, those things are horrible and they should not be happening in your workplace. I'm going to be focusing more on the things that you see every day in the workplace that you may or may not recognize as being contributors to creating, a toxic work environment. So what makes an environment toxic in that sense? It's not being overwhelmed or disorganized. Things like that can be challenging, especially if you're short-staffed, but that's not normally what drives someone to hate their job. Maybe they don't like what they're doing, but that's something completely different. I'm talking about environmental factors that just maybe they liked their job, and these environmental factors are so stressful they just don't want to go in anymore. So generally speaking, the toxicity in a work environment derives not from the work, but the people in the workplace. And it's not always who you think. It's not just the boss or bosses or other teammates. In many cases, it's also some of the customers. And I think the best place to start with this is by taking a look at what are we working towards? Like, what type of an environment are we trying to create? What would be the antithesis of a toxic environment? And to do this, I want to go over a couple of pieces of the management technology we use in the MGE program. If you're familiar with MGE, you know that the basis of our curriculum is the Hubbard Management System, developed by American philosopher L. Ron Hubbard. And Mr. Hubbard spent over 30 years developing this system, and his works on management consist of literally millions of words, and cover just about any aspect of management you can think of, such as planning, executive skills, financial management, team building, and so on. And what I'm going to be covering you, this quote as well as a couple of other quotes, come from several different articles written by Mr. Hubbard that are featured in MGE's executive training. So I'm going to start off with this one. It's very short, but it has to do with the environment we're trying to create. And here's what he says. A safe environment is a productive environment. An unsafe environment is an empty hall. All right, so what we're trying to create is a safe environment. So what does that mean? Environment being our surroundings, but we're talking about a work environment. Obviously, whoever's working for you can't feel physically threatened. I mean, that's kind of a no-brainer. And you can look at it from a production perspective, and this becomes very obvious to look at because there's more dangers than just physical harm. There can be dealing with somebody who's just a drain, almost like an energy vampire you're dealing with all day, or someone who's giving you a continuous hard time or making your life miserable. That makes the environment less safe. But let's say your favorite restaurant, let's say the area around your favorite restaurant started to become a bit crime infested, okay? It was like a bit dangerous, and you felt that in order to take your spouse out for dinner, you had to go armed. Well, you probably wouldn't go to eat there anymore. That's not like a nice Saturday night out, okay? That's usually not what you're looking for. So that becomes an unsafe environment, but let's look at it from the restaurant's perspective. In that case, they're going to probably lose a lot of business. Now, that's an extreme example. What would be a safe work environment beyond, freedom from physical harm, which is sort of a no-brainer? But what would that look like? It would be productive. I would be protected if I do my job. It would be drama free. There's not a lot of people yelling, screaming, arguing all the time. And I can focus on why I'm there. You know, if I do all I'm supposed to do and I do my job and I'm fulfilling the duties and the functions that I'm supposed to fulfill, I don't feel like I have to continuously defend myself from my fellow team members or from customers even. I can just go there, work, and do my thing, and it's fun as part of the team. That's a safe environment. That's what we're trying to create when we have an organization. That's critical. So how do we create a safe environment? There's a lot of things on there. So there's tons of stuff I could go over with you with regards to organization and things like this that we do cover on the MGE program. That's my selfless plug for a minute. If you want to find out more about the MGE Power Program, I'll put a link to it on the episode webpage. But there's a fundamental lesson on this, a fundamental from Mr. Hubbard that I'll just read you this quote from Mr. Hubbard, and it explains it very well. He says this: "A good manager ignores rumor and only acts on statistics." And he goes on. He says, "Had I heeded over the years any rumor mongerer, we would have no organizations. I generally don't listen, and if I do, only go so far as inspecting statistics." Okay, so what are we supposed to operate from the perspective of being a manager? We're supposed to have stats. Okay, not just us, but the people working for us. There's a number of important reasons for this. Obviously, beyond just measuring productivity, generally you'll find if someone's a problem employee or a quote unquote toxic employee, they won't be a super productive employee. And I want to be clear about this, okay? Because you could kind of take a look at this from a couple different perspectives and get it a bit wrong. Let's say I have a new receptionist, and he or she is not doing a great job. As a matter of fact, they're doing such a poor job but they're very nice. They're a nice person. But they're doing such a poor job that the other two people up at the front have to grab pieces of their job and do them. Okay? So, as it turns out, I have some conflict at the front desk because the financial coordinator and the schedule coordinator are continuously pissed off at the receptionist because he or she is not doing their job. So the receptionist comes to me and says that the scheduler and financial coordinator are being really mean to them. So I could look at this and go, oh, well, they're just being toxic. They're being mean to the receptionist. No, they're defending their jobs and they're getting tired of having to do someone else's work. That would upset anybody. That's the problem there is the receptionist. Now, if I had statistics on the receptionist and I was actually measuring that receptionist's productivity as well as the productivity of the other two people, I would be able to figure this out very quickly. As Mr. Hubbard says, and if I do, only go so far as inspecting statistics. So I would go up, I see this conflict, I look at the statistics, I see the financial coordinator is collecting at 98%, my collections are killing it. I see my schedule coordinator has a super packed and productive schedule, and I see that the statistics I'm keeping for the receptionist are really bad. Well, then my problem is most likely with my receptionist. So you have to be careful with this. Maybe your receptionist your hygienist gets upset with somebody at the front, but your hygienist is, uber super productive. There's nothing wrong with being a productive person and not enjoying having to deal with non-production. And I'm not looking to create an environment where everybody is just always super nice to each other. They have to get along, obviously. I don't want somebody who just torpedoes all the relationships you have on the team to where people can't actually talk to one another. But I'm looking for productive people. Generally speaking, if you have a couple productive people, they will get along. There's a 1 in a million chance there's some weird personality conflict that, could not be predictive. Fine. But generally speaking, productive people will get along. So statistics become extremely important, okay? Because if you're measuring properly with statistics, you're measuring what that person or position is contributing to the organization. If you want an analogy, think of being in a tug of war. So let's say there's 6 people on your side and 6 people on the opposing side. So you would expect, if you're trying to win this tug of war, that everybody is going to pull to the best of their ability. Maybe some people are stronger, some people have better leverage than the others, but that doesn't matter. All the people you have are doing their darndest and pulling as hard as they possibly can. But now imagine for a second, out of these 6 people, 4 of them are pulling with all their might to the best of their ability. One of them is just kind of hanging out and looking at the rope and drinking a cup of coffee. All right, they're being perfectly nice about it. They're not being rude or mean. They're just looking at the rope, maybe playing with it, twang. But they're not really actively contributing to pulling on that to win the tug of war. Well, that person is not a productive employee. That person's potentially a problem. Okay, and by statistic, if you were to measure foot-pounds per square inch or however you would measure someone's contribution to a tug of war, their statistics would be very low. Then you can get real toxic employees who instead of pulling are pretending to pull while they push. And this is the one that I think that always throws people off. And, this is where you might have a receptionist who's so bad that when they get let go, the new patient statistic all of a sudden jumps up because they're no longer blowing people off. That's addition by subtraction. And I've seen it many times in my career. If you have somebody who works for you and then they have to take, a month off, or a month and a half, and all of a sudden the office does better than it ever did before, and then it's 3 or 4 days before this person's supposed to return and the rest of the employees are dreading their return, that person may be a problem. Just saying, something to look at. So you get the idea. Statistics measure what somebody actually does. And if someone is producing, that will be represented in their statistics. So obviously there's a couple things. The stat has to actually measure what the person actually does, and it has to be kept regularly. But that tells you that you need a degree of separation of labor. I've talked about that in other episodes. It's very difficult to have a statistics for 3 people who are just front desk people and don't have a division of labor or duties. One's not in charge of the schedule, the other's in charge of finance and so on. You have to have division of labor. With someone who has a very specific job, such as an associate doctor or a hygienist, it's easy to keep a statistic, their production statistic. And to that end, I'll put a download on the episode webpage if you want it. It's a list of statistics that we recommend our clients keep on a regular basis. If you want to download it, you can get on the episode webpage. But I would definitely be keeping statistics on the people that I have because, as Mr. Hubbard says, a good manager ignores rumor and only acts on statistics. So if I have no statistics, or stats for short, how am I going to know what the problem is? I've seen this before. I've been in a lot of offices, been in close to 1,000 dental practices across the United States. And I remember years back sitting down with a doctor whose office was a wreck, and we sort of reconstructed what had happened to his practice. And to keep it as anonymous as possible, let's say he had employees A, B, and C. And he still had employee C. A and B had been let go or fired. And the reasons were really sketchy. A got let go because employee C saw A working on their resume and told the doctor about it and told them they thought they were quitting. And employee B, there was some type of a confrontation that occurred as a result also of employee C. When we look at their statistics, A and B were very productive. We had to reconstruct them. C had been non-productive almost from the day they had started, okay? So if the doctor had had this information and had statistics, they would have known that here's employee C complaining about A and B, that employee C was actually the problem. Okay, otherwise you create an environment where it's very easy for a problem, toxic team member to mess with the other employees who are actually productive and blow them off. But as I mentioned earlier, it's not always the team members. Sometimes it's the customers. So Mr. Hubbard goes on. From that same quote I just read you, he continues. I'll read this to you here. He says this: "It is easy to discipline staff and hard to discipline the public. A lazy executive," and lazy is in all capital letters, "a lazy executive only disciplines staff." Read that again. Let that sink in for a minute. It is easy to discipline staff and hard to discipline the public. A lazy executive only disciplines staff. And he continues, "It takes more confront to tackle the public." So this one's kind of funny because it flies in the face of something that especially those of us involved in business in the United States have been steeped in since we were young, which is the customer is always right. So that is an absolutely untrue statement. The customer is not always right. Now, there is a spirit in that statement that I agree with, which is try to accommodate the customer as much as possible, make them feel welcome, make them feel comfortable, give them the best service possible. All of that I 1,000% agree with. Like, I want to take care of my customers so that the experience they have in my business blows away all the other businesses. That I agree with 1,000,000,000%. But I do not agree that the customer is always right. If someone comes into MGE and starts treating my receptionist rudely, They're not right. They're actually being very wrong right now, and they're actually a problem. Okay? If I come into your practice, or let's say I miss 3 appointments in a row, and when your scheduler calls me, I mouth off and tell her something nasty to get her off the phone. Does that make me right? You don't go, oh, Jeff's the customer. Let's not upset him. No, I just treated your staff like garbage. All right? So I'm being very, very wrong at that point. And here's the problem, is if you look at just from a numbers basis, without getting into all the specifics, there is a certain percentage of the populace that we can qualify as toxic. I'll probably do a future episode on it. Mr. Hubbard gets quite detailed on this subject. Just to let you know, it's absolutely not the majority of people. It's very small portion of the people you're going to run into would qualify as toxic, okay? So if we do this from purely a numbers perspective, let's say you have 10 staff and there's a certain percentage of people who are going to be a problem. And just to be clear, that the toxic person, it doesn't matter. A toxic person could be smart. They could be not smart. They could be rich, poor. It doesn't matter what walk of life they come from. They just, they're just toxic. Okay. So a small percentage of these people potentially could be toxic. So I have 10 staff. So we're only talking, I can count potentially my toxic staff members on my hand, one hand. Well, how many patients do you have? And how many patients do you see a day? Let's say I see 20 patients a day in my practice. Let's say I see 30. 30 patients a day, 4 days a week. That's 120 people a week. It's 480 people to 500 people per month. The numbers are on the side that where most of my problems are going to come from is going to be from my customer base in that case, not my employees. And here's what happens. So I have a customer come in. They rough up one of my employees. I'm not saying physically because that's obvious, but mentally rough up. They get nasty. They get rude. The employee doesn't want to do anything to upset the customer, whatever. But they've just negatively affected my employee. That negative effect is going to be not paid forward rather, but carried forward with the other patients that this person deals with. How might that happen? Let's say I have somebody doing finance, a treatment coordinator. They're talking to somebody who makes them very wrong for wanting to collect money. You people just want my money. You're horrible, blah, 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 blah. Makes this treatment coordinator, spin. They start to feel really introverted. They feel very uncomfortable discussing money with patients now. So the next patient that they get is just a normal, regular, everyday person. They sit down with this person and they don't do what they usually do. They're very uncomfortable about mentioning the cost associated with treatment. Maybe they try to just have them pay for a portion of the treatment plan. So they don't want to pay for all of it. That person 2 patients ago just negatively affected the performance with this patient they're dealing with now. So that's how it affects the rest of your team. As a matter of fact, one of the first things we teach a new receptionist here at MGE is like, look, some people are just problems. There are people who would hate you for feeding starving babies and puppies. And that's fine. That just means I don't have to associate with them. So you're going to have some people give you a hard time. It's going to be a very small percent, so don't worry about it. And don't take it personally. We just don't deal with those folks. So if I'm going back to this quote from Mr. Hubbard again, it is easy to discipline staff and hard to discipline the public. A lazy executive only disciplines staff. Takes more confront to tackle the public. That means that you don't just discipline the employees when they're being a problem. You have to discipline in your case, your patients. I would have to discipline my customers. So what might that look like? Well, I'll give you a few examples. I remember going over this with a client. They went back home, and this happened the next week. Patient comes in, really nasty to their hygienist. Not like completely overboard. They have to be gotten rid of from the practice nasty, but just really rude and gruff with the client, the doctor's receptionist. So what does the doctor do? Receptionist is in tears. Doctor sees this, asks the patient to come talk to him for a moment. Sits in the office with the patient, says, listen, I have to tell you, I value my team here. And after he talked to the hygienist, of course, and I can't have people talking to my staff that way. It's really not okay with me. She's been a great hygienist for years. She's a valuable part of the team. So now what happened next with the patient was interesting because this is just something, it's like a little tip you can look for. What do they do in response to that? In this case, that patient, shook his head. Doctor, I'm so sorry. I'm just having a terrible day. And I'm just so, can I go apologize to her? And he's like, sure. He walked over with the patient. The patient apologized to the hygienist. They were able to iron things out. The next day, he sent a big teddy bear and flowers to the hygienist saying he was sorry. And it was fine. He went on as a patient, but you know what? He knew he better never do that again. You see? So, and what did that do? Here's what's interesting. It's something you don't necessarily look at. So fine, the patient knew that they couldn't act out like that anymore because everybody has the capacity to do that, okay? But then what message did that send the hygienist and by extension the rest of the doctor's team? It sent the message that nobody messes with us. Do you see? This is a critical message that your team should be getting. If the reverse had happened, patient comes in, is nasty to the hygienist, and the doctor does absolutely nothing about it, is just apathetic about it. Oh, that's Mr. Jones. He's just like that. The hygienist is going to think, this just stinks. Hopes Mr. Jones doesn't end up on her schedule again, or another Mr. Jones, and may start looking for another, place to work because this is just too much drama. Because I guarantee you, if Mr. Jones is allowed to do that, lots of patients are allowed to do that, and maybe other employees as well. I mean, let's take another example. Let's say, for instance, you have a new patient and a receptionist that's been with you for, 10 years and does a great job. New patient goes to the receptionist, is really rude, mean, horrible, comes back to you to meet you for the first time, and you meet this new patient. They say, doctor, just have to tell you, your front desk is horrible. I've been in a lot of offices. She's one of the worst I've ever seen. She was rude to me, blah, 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 blah. Now, what would most people's reaction to that be if they're telling you this is the doctor? You're going to think, oh, well, the customer's always right. How could she possibly do that? Go up and yell at the receptionist. And that's exactly the wrong thing to do. First off, I would look at it from a couple different perspectives. Number one, I just met this patient. They're new to my practice. My receptionist has been with me for 10 years, and I have to trust her, okay? I don't have to do anything, but I trust her, okay? Just because I've watched her perform in the practice. She does a good job. So, I can tell you what I would do. If someone came in and said that to me, I'd say, excuse me for a second. I'd go talk to the receptionist, say, I'm sitting with this new patient here. And the new patient said, blah, blah, blah. And she might say, that's absolutely not true. He's been, nasty to me ever since he walked in. So then I'd probably go back to the patient. And look, I'm not telling you to do this. This is just your, thing. Okay. You can decide what you want to do. Like, as with all these podcasts, folks, you have to decide what's best for your office and you have to take responsibility for implementing it. I'd go back in and say, well, I just spoke to my receptionist and here's what she said, blah, 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 blah. And I want to see what they do. Well, I'm the customer and I'm always right. Well, okay, maybe this just isn't the right practice for you. If they say, well, that's not what happened, I might bring the receptionist in. Well, I don't want to do that. I don't really care. And that may sound ridiculous, but, and it's not like I'm seeking universal truth here, but I can't create an environment where someone can come in and mess with my team or my practice that way. Let's reverse it for a second. Let's say it's a patient who's been with me for 10 years and this is a brand new receptionist. Well, maybe there's some validity to what they're saying at that point. Do you see? But ultimately, my team has to know that I have their back. If that happened here, let's say someone here at MGE, client came in and was nasty to our receptionist. We have our receptionist, Amanda, is amazing. She's been with us for a long, long time. Best receptionist we've ever had in the history of the company, which is, going back about 30 years. Okay. Let's say they were rude to Amanda. What would happen? Well, back in the old days, that would be me talking to the client. We now have a person who's in charge of that area. They get a little report. They sit down with the client and say, hey, so we have a report here. You came in and you did this and this. And we would look for the client's response. And you can apply this in your practice. If the client tried to take some form of responsibility for it, then they're probably okay. Well, I'm really sorry. Can I do something to fix it? Great. Okay. They can go apologize and sort this out, but then they know they can't do it again. But what if they said, well, look, I'm a customer and you can't treat me that way and blah, blah, blah. Well, then they need to move on. And obviously, if you're going to end up dismissing somebody, I recommend that you follow the Dental Practice Act for your state or province if you're in Canada. You want to do it to the letter. You don't ever want to violate it, but you don't need that in your business. Because again, remember, if you do that and you keep this toxicity out of your business, the message, it's not even just about messaging, folks. It's actually keeping that stuff out of the workplace. Because look, if you have 20 people that you're seeing in a day and one is nasty or one is toxic, who is everybody talking about? They're talking about that one nasty person. So you don't need that there. Remember that quote from earlier. A safe environment is a productive environment. The environment feels safe when I'm just comfortable and can just do my job. I'm not worried about some customer walking in and treating me like garbage because your receptionist doesn't have power to do anything about it. So you, the doctor, or your office manager have to be able to confront and handle this stuff. And you can't just watch what the employees are doing. You also have to watch what the public is doing and not allow the public that you have to run roughshod over your team. And that's usually, you got to keep statistics as we talked about, but that's the first step to creating a safe environment. Now, he ends off in this article with this. I'll read you this. He says, when an executive listens to rumor and bad things about his fellow staff members without looking at the actual production statistics, that executive can harm the organization badly. That goes right back to what I was talking about earlier with employees A, B, and C. This is why you have to have your team on statistics. This is why you have to have your radar out if anybody comes in and starts messing with members of your team and not allow it to happen. Okay? So if you just start doing that, that's sort of the first step to creating a safe environment. You know what's cool about a safe environment? Like we have clients come here. I've seen this happen with clients before. They'll come to MGE and they're sitting on the couch. I see them sitting on the couch in reception for 20 minutes or something, like just hanging out on the couch. You got to start your course. And they're like, I just like being here. It's so comfortable. And I've had then, because we create a safe environment, not just for the staff, but also for the public. I don't if you're here at a seminar and you have somebody who doesn't want to be here and they're creating problems, I'm not going to let them be here and ruin your experience. Okay? That's also my viewpoint. But it's funny, I've watched how this is carried on with our clients. I've had plenty of clients tell me that patients come into their practice and they express how they love being there and they feel so comfortable. And here's where this is at a dental office, folks. People are supposed to be afraid of the dentist, and you have people craving to go to the dentist because it's such a safe, wonderful, comfortable environment. Okay, so look, start doing that. Obviously you got to try what you're comfortable trying, but look, you do that, your team will love it. Dentistry is fun, and it's a rewarding profession. It's also just a great experience to be part of a dental team. And by creating that type of an environment, you stand out from a workplace perspective, and it makes it a lot easier to keep and acquire more staff, as well as keep the environment productive. It's sort of like a little oasis of productivity and fun for your team and for your patients. Anyway, I hope this helps. Let me know how this goes. Don't forget, we have that download for the statistics if you want to get it on the episode webpage. And if you have any questions about this, you can always email me at jeffb@mgeonline.com. We'll put a link on the episode webpage. And I'll leave off with saying, obviously I'm not an employment attorney, so don't forget, if you need employment attorney advice, get an employment attorney or contact an HR company. And if you have any questions about MGE or would like to know more about us, you can visit us at mgeonline.com or call us at 800-640-1140. Folks, have a great week, and we'll see you at the next episode.